Ciaran Lynch.
Thank you, Ciaran Lynch. I welcome the proposals brought forward by Fianna Fáil here into the Chamber this evening and last night. However, it can't go without comment that in the autumn of 2009, I, on behalf of the Labour Party, brought forward a private member's motion that was indicating the crisis that was actually coming down the tracks and the necessity for a structure to be put in place to deal with stressed mortgages. Regretfully, on that evening, Fianna Fáil and government talked down the extent of the problem, and the response of government from that period on was a response of let's wait and see what actually happens, and no actions actually came about as a result of the two reports that the government had actually commissioned at that time. There was the initial publication of the Cooney report and then the finalised publication of the Cooney report. The Cooney report was published on the day that Dáil went into recess last summer. It was not debated in this House, and its final recommendations were published in November of last year, and those recommendations were not debated in this House. So I welcome the opportunity that the government is actually bringing forward this evening to have this issue extensively debated and to allow members at both sides of the House to actually discuss the Keane report. Now, the Keane report, to my mind, Ciaran, has two views or two opinions on it. And I think those opinions are informed by where somebody stands on the issue of blanket debt forgiveness. It is very obvious and evident, watching the reporting of the Keane report over the last week or so, that those who are in favour of blanket debt forgiveness are those who are actually opposing the Keane report. Because the Keane report, in its essence, is not a finalised document, and nor should it be. The Keane report, however, is prescriptive, but it does lay out a very comprehensive structure as to how the mortgage and personal debt crisis that this country is facing must actually be dealt with. And underpinning that are a number of key principles. The number one principle being that people who are honestly meeting their obligations to deal with their debts will not be put out of their home. That is the key principle of the Keane report, and that is actually enshrined in the document, and that's what the Keane report will actually achieve. Secondly, it recognises that affordability of meeting debt is at the heart of the problem. It is not actually negative equity. It is people's ability to service their debt is what the key issue here actually is. And that means that it's not the size of the debt that people actually have to deal with, it's their ability to sustainably actually deal with that debt. Now, there has been some criticisms of the Keane report in the House and outside of this chamber, and I'd like to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. As I've said, there has been the suggestions that this wasn't dealt with inclusively. It shouldn't be, but we have seen it today where members who have views outside of this House have come before the Finance Committee, and the sequence of that process is actually correct. We're now allowing other agencies to enhance the Keane report rather than actually have a report that would take 5 or 6 months or maybe 10 months to actually roll out. Secondly, there's the criticism of the enhanced mortgage relief, where people who bought mortgages or took out mortgages between 2002 and 2006 would receive an enhanced mortgage payment. The Keane report is emphatic that this should not happen. And it's right that it should not happen. And members of this House who are criticising the government for not implementing that measure need to come clean. Are they saying that they're actually for or against this measure? Because that measure will cost 14 billion euros to actually implement, and where are you going to find that money? And do you believe that that is actually the right approach to go about? Because it's not. Because not everybody who is in negative equity is in a difficulty with actually meeting their debts. So that must be realised. Secondly, there's the issue of dealing with MABs. The Keane report is very, very clear where MABs stands in terms of dealing with this difficulty. MABs is providing a service in the community, but it's not actually comprehensive, and it's not at the same level across the country. So what the Keane report is recommending is that a personal debt service would be structured that would enhance and work alongside of MABs, and on occasion be based in MABs offices. So what we're doing through the Keane report is actually enhancing the provision that MABs are doing at the moment, but more specifically we are bringing in professionals with an expertise in this area that will rebalance the relationship relationship between borrower and lender and people who have actually expertise to do so. Secondly, where there is some consideration must be given on the order or the broader issue of mortgage interest relief.
Excellent.
Now, to my mind, we must first of all redefine why mortgage interest relief was introduced in the first basis. Mortgage interest relief was brought in at a time when people were given assistance because they had lost their job, and the concept was that they would get themselves back to work in the short term. Secondly, it was introduced at a period where houses were increasing in value over a period of time. Neither of those two premises are in place now. The prospect of long-term employment or unemployment is out there, and house prices are continuing to fall.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much, Laskin Corla. So that does need to be redefined, because the context, the way it was initially set up, was actually is actually changed. There are a whole host of other measures as well that must be acknowledged that are running in conjunction with the Keane report, Laskin Corla. They are the decision tree as is laid out in the report itself, which leads a comprehensive series of measures for those who can't pay some of their loans and those who are actually in unsustainable situations, and it deals extensively with those. It also sets out that we have to modernise bankruptcy and insolvency laws, because the current laws are inadequate and are antiquated, and it sets out a series of proposals as well, 3 specifically with a review of the judicial process, a non-judicial debt settlement approach, and also the issue of debt relief orders. To conclude, Laskin Corla, there is also a process of normalisation that we have to engage in, and we're actually seeing that this week. We saw the central bank issue its statement this morning with regard to introducing more prudent lending practices, where people's incomes are related to their affordability to buy a house, where we see a return to 20-year mortgage schedules and other measures which were put out the door during the bubble years created by Fianna Fáil. We're also seeing the creation of a house price database, which is in committee stage at the moment, which is also critical to normalising the housing market and to introduce affordability to it. So in conclusion, Laskin Corla, the key principle of the approach the government is actually taking is that resolving debt requires long-term affordability, that the assessment of this debt is crucial and needs to be dealt on an ongoing basis, and that a professional service is required to do that. And ultimately, in the absence of not taking that such an approach, people who are in current difficulties may actually move to more unsustainable positions, and their problems become worse over a period of time. So I commend the government in bringing forward the Keane report. I certainly welcome what Deputy McGrath has brought before the House this evening and tonight. The bill is not robust in a number of areas, and if I had more time I would go into that, but it is showing that at last Fianna Fáil are moving in the right direction in terms of resolving a difficulty that was of their making. Thank you.